say things that are urgent and the user needs to see immediately, and things that are not as urgent. So it allows you to structure the work in your app better. Great question.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think I'm really proud of like all of like you, Rick, and everyone who has done, I think, a really good job kind of explaining concurrency, or at least like what we mean by concurrent rendering, because it's something that we haven't always in the past did an amazing job explaining. And I think in our initial communications, at least we're trying really hard to make it not seem so intimidating and make it clear to folks that it's really an exciting thing. It shouldn't be a scary thing or a confusing thing. So great explanation, Rick.
And one thing that I'll add, I think that what's great about this strategy is that if you don't see the value in these features, right, you try it out and you're like, I don't understand like why I would want to do this. We're not making you do it. Like, but we think that these features are really powerful. We think that like adding concurrency is something that can help you build better user experiences. And so we want to get it in people's hands, allow you to start trying it. And I think it's going to be really great.
Yeah, thanks again, Ricky. So I was going to invite Spike onto the stage real quick, but I don't know if he accepted but I'll just ask his question for him because I thought it was funny. He said, I always imagined it pronounced react, not react, but maybe I'm wrong. Curious if this is universal pronunciation on the core team. And you know what? It absolutely is not universal. I've stopped noticing when people pronounce it differently from me. So that's a really great, I'm glad you noticed that, but I don't think there is an official pronunciation. If we made one, I would probably, make people mad by choosing the one that's different from what half of people say. It's like a GIF thing. But to be fair, I pronounce it the same way as you. So, sorry if there's an inconsistency. We don't really impose that as part of our communications guidelines. So next, I wanted to get to our special guest, whom I teased earlier. And as a lot of you already guessed, it is Tom Occhino, or Tomo, as we call him affectionately. Tom is, man, how do we describe Tom? Tom, like, he's been on the React team from before it was even called React. He's, as OG as you can really get. And I just wanted to invite him on here to chat to him for just a little bit, because Tom made an announcement earlier this week that he is leaving Facebook, and I guess leaving our team directly, I suppose, but not really. And so, Tom, it's great to have you on here. I'm really glad you can make it. And yeah, so I'll just start with a question, which is, as I said, you've been on the team for a long time. You've been our leader for a long time. So many of us associate you, React with you very closely. I assume you couldn't have imagined that React would get to the point it is now. I mean, maybe you're an optimistic guy, but React is used by millions of developers today. What has surprised you most about the journey along the way?
Oh, such a good question. And thank you for having me. But actually, before I answer your question, it's pronounced React. I remember the day when Jordan and I were discussing very early on what we should even call this thing. The original name for React was F-Bolt. There's some history there. I can tell the story another time. But yeah, React. To be honest, we never, ever imagined that React would get as big as it's gotten. And I think all we were trying to do, and perhaps unsuccessfully with our initial messaging, was share about the sort of problems we were facing as we scaled our engineering organization internally, and the solution or sort of mitigation that we came up with. And so if you look at our initial sort of messaging, our initial video when we gave this presentation at JSConf, basically all we said was like, hey, here's a thing. It's working pretty well for us. Give it a shot, see if it'll help you. If it doesn't, no worries. And I think like all we were looking for was just to see if the problems that we were facing were, universal, if other companies and other teams and individuals are facing them. And it turned out that over a long period of time, we learned that, yeah, like some of these problems were universal. I don't think we had any ambitions of getting massive adoption of React. It certainly was not an explicit goal in the beginning.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so, I mean, that was, let's see, you and Jordan, this conversation you were having, that must have been 2013, 2012, maybe?
Like that's 2012.
Yeah, that's That's like 9 years ago. Oh my goodness. Well, because that's a long time. But then I was just thinking that React 18, the germs of that are almost as long. Like
That's
even
right.
just the time that I've worked on, it's called React 18 now, but we've called it like concurrent React, we called it async React, we called it Fiber. Like that's 5 years old now, which is the majority of that span. Um, so what are your thoughts? Like it is really just a total coincidence that you've announced you're kind of going on a well-deserved break this week, and we're also really releasing a public alpha. It's maybe a good coincidence, but like, what are your thoughts reaching this milestone specifically? Because when I joined the team about 5 years ago, this was the first thing we tackled. I have a lot of really great memories about that Fiber collaboration. I just tweeted out a link before the show to the website that you made called isfiberreadyyet.com. Like, I have a lot of really amazing memories on this team, but that might be my fondest when we all got together in a room and like tried to burn that chart down. So yeah, what do you
I
think about this
agree.
milestone?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, and I agree about that time. Somewhat deceptive of a management technique. I was like, I feel like progress isn't happening fast enough. Let me make a website where they'll be able to track this over time. No, we had so much fun with that. But this milestone really is a long time in the making, and I think like our initial hypothesis for why we needed to move in the direction of concurrent rendering was really influenced by what we were seeing happening in native software. You have so much more flexibility to do off-thread, work and to do rescheduling of work. And I think we also had this hunch that the industry and technology is moving in the direction of having more CPUs, but those CPUs themselves aren't necessarily getting faster and faster. And so, what's the right architecture here? And actually, I think like we've finally, after a lot of research and a lot of iteration, especially on the new Facebook.com, we've gotten to a place where actually like it really is noticeable. Like it really does feel a lot better, and you can see that this is going to unlock, the next 10 years of kind of innovation in this space. And so, this milestone is huge. I've been, emotional about it, as well as my extended, time at Facebook, and I just feel this just sense of pride and joy and appreciation for this team and the journey that we've been on so far. And I'm just so excited about the working group and shifting the center of communication away from just being 100% kind of internal on the team and really bringing the community in. Last note on this, at the most recent React Conf, one of the things I said I really, really wanted us to do was start taking an active role in the community and both shaping it and bringing it in to be part of the conversation here. And this is just a really proud moment for me. So thank you so much to the team and also for having me on here. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And as all of you can probably tell, if you haven't met Tom before, whatever, all the good stuff that our team does, like the optimism that I hope we bring to everything, the enthusiasm, the ambition, like it all either directly or indirectly comes from Tom, which I think you could really see in the way that you can hear him talk about React and how much he loves the team and has loved working on this project. Also, I just mentioned isfiberready.com, and Rick has reminded me that Sophie is on the chat. I don't know if Sophie wants to talk real quick, but I did. She doesn't have to, but she was an enormous part of that effort as well. So it's so good to see some longtime React alumni on the call today. Oh, it looks like Sophie did want to say something real quick. So let me see. Add a speaker. Hey, Sophie, what's going on? He's connecting right now. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Hi,
There we go.
I actually need to run right now. I have a meeting right now at 10:30, and so I was just about to log off. But just wanted to wish you all some good vibes. I'm excited that what we had originally in the day with isfiberready.com has like made it all the way here, and soon it'll be in everyone's hands. It's been a long journey.
Yeah, so exciting. Like, for those of you who don't know, like, Sophie was one of, I think, the original open source contributor to React, right? And then she was on the team and she managed us for a little while. And she still is very much an advisor and a person that we look to help us when we get stuck with things. So really great to speak to you, Sophie. Um, All right, so let's dive into a few more questions. I see that we have some questions streaming in. So I'm gonna go ahead and name because I'm realizing that when I logistically, I'll just give you a peek here into why sometimes I struggle to get people on. So Lori suggested to me yesterday when I was asking her for advice, that I should invite people onto the stage like a little bit before they join. But I'm noticing that when I invite someone and they approve, it turns into a request, and then I have to approve the request again. So anyway, if I say your name right here in the next few minutes, please send me a request so I can just go ahead and approve you ahead of time. I think that'll just make the transitions between speakers a lot more smoothly. So I think I'm going to ask a question from Oliver Lopez, Oliver Loops. I'm going to ask a question from Michael Chan, and I think Mark Funk. I'll also ask a question from him. So if y'all don't mind just sending me a request, then I can get to you when that happens. But before that, let me go to one of our planned questions so that I can give them a chance to send an invite or send a request. I'm going to direct my next question to Brian. So Brian, concurrent rendering is, as Rick gave an explanation earlier, it's a pretty cool feature of like the new React architecture that you can opt into, but it works a bit differently than what some developers are used to. It could take some adjusting before they develop a mental model, perhaps. That's been our experience as we gave this to some folks during our testing. So how are we planning, or how are you planning to help people understand what's going on when they see unexpected behavior? And the reason I'm directing this to Brian, for folks that don't know, is Brian is the kind of designer and developer, largely single-handedly, not completely. He has some help, but on our team, he's the React Dev Tools kind of owner. So Brian, what are your thoughts there?
Hey, so the short answer is that we're going to be adding new developer tooling for this over the coming months. We currently have an extension and also a standalone NPM tool called React DevTools that lets you connect to React applications, whether they're in the browser or React Native, and explore them. And the tooling, the way it currently works, kind of gives you sort of two pieces. One's a tab that shows all of your components. And this thing is focused on what the current state of your application is, what the current props and state are. And then the other thing is called the profiler, which historically has been focused on how fast your components are. And in old React terms, those two things were, they made sense. But in the new concurrent sort of APIs that we're looking at, there are other concepts that sort of fall between the cracks here, like IO. So with suspense, you could have a batch of work that takes longer than you expect because one of the resources you're loading maybe didn't get preloaded and your components were just waiting on data to come back. Or some other things we haven't talked about yet in terms of how the internals work. There's some stuff that we'll talk about maybe in a little bit with preloading and such, but we could also be working on some other things at different priorities at the same time. And the current profiling tools don't show you any insight about this. So if you see your UI looks slow and you look at the profiler and you see that the components rendered quickly and you don't know why, there's sort of a big missing gap here in terms of these two new areas. And so we're going to be adding some new tooling that gives you more insight into this, both which components took a long time suspending because of their IO, or maybe which render works were delayed because React was working on something else that was higher priority at the time. And we have some pre-release versions of some of these tools already. I'm going to retweet a link to one as soon as I finish talking here in a minute for anyone that missed it for one of the new tools. But basically, we're going to be adding more capabilities into the profiling section of React DevTools over the coming months that sort of give you, to give you more insight here. And if you have questions about how this stuff works, or if you are digging into performance problems and you feel like there's something the tooling just isn't giving you, you can always reach out to either me directly or the team or GitHub and let us know. And we get a lot of ideas for new features in the tooling from people like yourselves who are writing applications and have these questions. So please do share them with us.
Thanks so much, Brian. And, sorry, Dan, you want to go? Yeah.
Can I add a small thing? Yeah, so I wanted to clarify, Brian used the term IO, and I just wanted to clarify that refers to input output, but that's it's just data fetch, and that's what we mean by that. So essentially, because we're building we're bringing first class integration of data fetch into React, so like it becomes something that React is aware of, rather than something you just build, like outside of React, then that makes it possible to build tooling and like visualizations that let you actually see like which components were fetching data and for how long. And that's kind of like why maybe like the screen is not updated and you can see, oh, like this component was fetching data. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. And Dan and I would say Dan and Rachel especially are kind of they try and keep us honest in terms of not using jargon when we communicate externally. So sometimes I forget and I slip up and use words like IO or terms like IO. And yeah, thanks Dan for catching that and making sure that we, because React is useful for a lot of folks, not just software engineers even. There's lots of designers, which I think that's a topic we might touch on a little bit later. So thanks, Dan. I was going to say to Brian though about the scheduler profiling thing that you're alluding to. As someone who has seen like the existing version of that, I'm incredibly excited about that project. I think it's going to be super high impact, and like once we get it into everyone's hands, like whatever confusion people might have about concurrent rendering, which hopefully not that much, I think that the DevTools profiler is going to be a really great asset for the community in clearing up those misconceptions, perhaps, and like the level of polish that you see in the rest of the dev tools, largely because of Brian's efforts to make it that polished. I think you can expect the same thing from the upcoming features as well. So thank you so much. Okay, so let's get to another question. It looks like I successfully have invited Mark to ask his question. So Mark Funk, hi, nice to see you again. You want to just go ahead and ask the question that you asked?
Sure. So I was looking through the docs for start transition, and I noticed that there were two ways to call it. One off of what I think is React DOM with React.start transition, and another through the hook use transition. And I noticed that you get a pending state with use transition, but I wasn't sure why I would favor the hook over the global access or vice versa. And I'm curious to know if pending state is local to that one hook instance, meaning if I call start transition from that singular hook, is only the pending state set from that instance, or is it all hook usages, or is it every start transition call at the global level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll go ahead and answer this. The main thing the main difference between the hook API versus the one that you import from the React module is basically what you just said. Like one has an is pending that you can use. So is pending is essentially if you want to show a busy indicator. So like if I'm navigating or if I'm refreshing the screen, let's say, and when I hit the refresh button, there's already some content on the screen. It might be a little stale, but it's already there. Say I like pulled a refresh on some like grid of items or something like that. Rather than like hide all of the stale items, all of the existing ones, what you might do instead is show like a little spinner or like a shimmer effect to indicate that there's something going on in the background. And that's what is pending allows you to do. So that is pending flag is really the reason you would want to use the hook form. The one that you import from React, the one that is not a hook, it has the exact same API, just without the being able to use as pending. And it's useful for, when you import and use start transition from somewhere that's not directly in a component, like maybe a framework, like a data framework might use this or a router might use this internally. The idea is that you should be able to like use multiple start transitions. Like if you have, let's say a framework or a library uses start transition inside of its implementation, but then some user code inside an event handler or like an on-click will wrap around that. You could have like two starts and transitions that wrap around an update. And that should work. Like you'll still get the is pending on the local hook form that you used, but it doesn't mean that it breaks the other usage of start transition. And then in terms of like what is the is pending associated with? Yeah, it's associated with specifically the updates that you triggered with that hook's start transition. It's a little hard to explain verbally, but I think once people use it, it'll basically just work as they expect. We're actually still a little bit in the research area here. Like we might change the heuristic slightly. There's some research going into like if I have multiple transitions in a single queue, we should really only ever show the last one. So that's what we do. But maybe if you showed transitions across multiple queues, they should be allowed to finish independently. So we do have a little bit of work there. But the nice thing about this API is, we'll be able to tweak the heuristics a little bit later, and it shouldn't affect how you use it. It'll just affect, it'll just make for a nicer user experience. So I hope that answered your question. I think we might get into that a little bit later too when we talk about suspense. So I'm going to ask another question. Let me see if the people that I approved. Does someone want to speak?
Hey, Andrew?
Yes, Rachel.
Hi, this is Rachel. I just wanted to clarify here, in the previous question, docs were mentioned. I wanted to clarify that those docs exist in the working group's GitHub and can be read there. The live site docs are not the ones being referred to in that statement.
Yes, very, very good. Very good clarification. Actually, this is a great segue, Rachel, because I have a question I wanted to ask you, which is earlier this week, you and Dan gave an update on GitHub about an exciting new project. Do you want to give folks a summary of that here?
Yeah.
Rachel?
Well, I don't know if you saw, but last October we began an overhaul. Am I? It says mic is on. Are you able to hear me,
hear you now.
Or are we having connectivity issues?
It's a little delay, but we can hear you now.
Dang it, and I turned it on and off again. Okay, so you might have heard last October, Dan and I kicked off a project to overhaul React's documentation. As an example, the documentation has it's been to with every release, but definitely could use a little bit more. Well, let's be honest, could use a lot of caretaking and tending. So we've been approaching with all new user interface, all new curriculum, a lot of the content you're may be familiar with from overreacted.io, Dan's awesome blog going into the specifics of how React works behind the scenes. Well, that is now going to be part of a fully extended set of guides and API references, which should help you get good with React. Well, we will be launching a beta I don't want to give an exact date because then that would jinx it, but we are planning to share this content with the world by the end of the year, and we have been rolling it out in small groups, sort of like the working group, but a little bit closer to the chest while we're building out different pieces of the content. And it seems to be doing really well so far, so hopefully not too long now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rachel. And as someone who's seen like a sneak peek of the content that Rachel and Dan have been writing, it's going to be real good. It's going to be real good. I'm really excited about it. It makes our current docs look embarrassing. That's how good they are. And I actually think our current docs are pretty good. But thanks so much, Rachel. I think everyone's really excited about that. So I'm going to read out a few more names like I did a little earlier. If when I say your name, it means I intend to ask you a question later, assuming I have time. So please just send me a request to speak. That way I can approve you ahead of time and we can make the transition smooth. So Shruti Kapoor, Linton Yi, sorry if I mispronounced someone's name, and Oliver Loops. I don't think I already approved you. So yeah, if you don't mind, send me an invite and that way I can approve you. But next, let's go to Michael Chan, who has a question about research. Michael, do you want to share what you mean there?
Hey, what's up? I'm just so whelmed to be here and see all these faces and hear from everybody like Tomo. Yeah, y'all are awesome. And my big takeaway so far is that React is pronounced F-bolt. So that's a win, I think, for all of us. Yeah, so I do have a question about research. And I think that there's it can be a little bit opaque from the outside, like what discrete research phases there are. And I'd like to maybe get a little bit of clarity on that, because obviously, suspense has been in a research phase for like a really long time in terms of y'all working on it at Facebook, getting the APIs right, et cetera. But you also mentioned just recently that with the working group, some of the heuristics are still malleable. And that's kind of part of the work of the working group is to figure out the right heuristics, figure out some of the terminology that we should be using to refer to those things, whether they be like kind of in that transitional time between 7 and 8, or kind of like 8 on. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, do you have a way of thinking about that as we move forward? How ready are these things for the community to like pick up? And kind of like, what does that community research phase look like for you all, and what does success look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm going to direct this to Dan, because Dan and I are now, it feels weird to say it, but Dan and I have joined the team like around the same time. Dan a little bit before me. And so we've been here along with Brian. I guess Brian joined around the same time too. We've been here since, the beginning of the concurrent rendering. Well, not the beginning. There was actually research years before we joined the team, but and at the beginning of the fiber project, I should say. So we have had like a really close look at the whole life cycle of this really exciting, but like I think longer than we expected, maybe naively, little bit longer than we expected the project to take. But Dan, do you want to go ahead and provide some insight on like what does it mean when we say research, and like how long does it take for these features to come to fruition?
Yeah, sure. I can I can give it a try. Um, so it's actually pretty. I think it's kind of tricky. So I think in general on this team, we start with the theory, and I think that's something that we have not communicated well, and maybe we should explain that better. But um, in particular, so the person set in the technical direction for the team is Sebastian. Uh, he's been a team lead for a while, and he's the kind of person who really like when people come to him with problems like I want to I want to do this thing in React, or like I want to do that thing. He really goes back to first principles. So he sees connections between things that seem unconnected to me as a kind of a product developer. And he sees that, oh, actually there's some fundamental capability that if we add it, then all of these things can be kind of layered on top of that. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years, they're driven by this kind of theoretical first research that Jordan did initially in 2014, when I think he tried it with React and Worker, and that actually did not work that well, and so that led to like some rethinking, and then Sebastian took over and he did his own prototypes. But it kind of starts with this theoretical research, and just the understanding that like sometimes sometimes some approach is better than the other. In theory, it makes sense that you don't want every state update to be a kind of a bottleneck. Like even if you update a large part of the screen, it doesn't make sense to do it all at once. If from the user perspective, like some things are more urgent than others. And so it kind of starts with this theoretical understanding, but it's also deeply informed by kind of approaching it from the user perspective and design perspective. So it's kind of like this first stage is a blend of kind of computer science approach, but also user perception. So like there's research on user perception in that. Like how fast do people actually expect the interactions to happen, and what is kind of the psychology, and like how do people perceive time, and so on. And so we kind of start with that, but then and we make a prototype based on this. But then usually our first ideas are completely wrong, or just like the way we implement them is wrong, and the APIs are wrong. And you can't really, like, an API can look very elegant, but you can't really tell if it's going to work until you put it into production. And if you try to do it in a small app, it might seem like it works. If you make a demo, it might seem like it works well. But then if you kind of just give this API to developers and have them use it for 6 months to build something complex, and then come back, like you'll discover a lot of interesting things. And in many cases, we discover that it just doesn't work. Like this API doesn't compose very well. And what I mean by compose is I mean that for every API we're building, that's like the core principle of React. Things need to connect like Lego blocks. So it must be possible for different people working on different teams, working on different components, to just only know how their part works. And then the whole thing needs, like when you put the parts together, they should still work. And that's the core principle of how we're approaching the API design. And so eventually we find the right API, like after the seeing how people actually implement user interfaces with this and seeing all the mistakes, because we, like at Facebook, we do have a lot of control. So if we release an API in open source, in many ways, it's kind of game over. It's like, okay, if we want to change it, that's like a 2-year release cycle to fix the mistakes. Whereas internally, we can just, like change it all at once, and sure, like maybe we'll break something, maybe some people will be unhappy, but overall it allows us to iterate way faster and also see the results way faster. And at some point we get to a place where the API kind of makes sense and we see that, people use it, it composes well, and we also learn about, all the flaws in the implementation that we might want to fix and so on. And so that might take some time. And at some point it feels like, yeah, it's solid. It's ready for open source. And so this is usually when I put it in an alpha or like a beta, and we write an RFC that explains exactly how it works, and so on. And of course, at that point, like we take community feedback, and sometimes that leads to changes. Like there's been a few changes like this, but in most cases, it is pretty solid by that point, because like even though we only use it at Facebook, like the patterns that people use in UIs are not that different. It's like lists of things. It's like a thing that fetches some data, a thing that like animates from this state to that, and like tabbed interfaces. And of course, like there are some cases that maybe are pretty different from what we're building. But overall, like both from open source and like the UIs that we see that React is used for, like in Twitter and Spotify and so on, like we kind of get a sense that a lot of problems are similar. And so yeah, in terms of the feature rollout at Facebook, the way we do it is we usually start with one team. So like when we have this draft of an API that kind of seems to work, we usually give it to one team, and then they give us feedback, and we kind of like iterate on that until it works for that team's use cases, and then we try to expand. And so it's like a process. It's like working with clients. Like you start with one client, then you bring on another client, and then at some point you know that you covered most bases, and then you kind of can take on the whole community as a client as well. So I hope that kind of explains
Yeah,
it.
that was a great overview. I really like the way you described the, I kind of think of it as like so you talked about like the first principles based model that we create, and then we try it out in the real world, and then sometimes it doesn't work out, so then we have to go back and reincorporate our evidence and create like a refined model. Then we go back and we try it out again. It's like a cycle almost. And I wanted to give a specific shout out, because Dan mentioned that we have like people who test this out for us at Facebook. I want to give a specific shout out to what we call the React data team at Facebook, and also the web core teams and web speed teams, because they have been maybe our greatest asset all along as we take our wild ideas and try and put them into like a usable framework. So in particular, the folks that maintain Relay, incredible help for us as we took these computer science concepts, as Jen said, and turn them into something that can be used by all React developers. Okay, so we're getting a little bit close to the end of the hour. We might go a little over because we still have some more. I'm not going to be able to get to everyone, unfortunately, but we still have some really great questions. If we don't get to everyone, again, I am hoping that we're going to have more of these in the future, so this won't be your last chance. And we have Rick's been doing a great job recording all of these, so we can probably just roll them over into the next Q&A that we do. But the next person that we wanted to talk to was Shruti. And I think, yeah, Shruti's here. So Shruti, do you want to ask your question? Shruti, are you there? I see you're a speaker, but I don't hear you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Okay.
excellent. Yes.
Okay, I have a question. My impression from the updates in React 18 is that they are mostly focused, like the big theme is building performant UIs and removing the janky experience we have related to state transitions and batching state updates. Is that a correct assumption?
Rick, do you want to take this question? Ricky, are you there? You don't have to. Did I catch you off guard?
Yeah, no, I was getting some of the questions queued up, but yeah, I can
Yeah,
definitely,
sorry.
I can definitely take this. Yeah, I think that that's a good take. Removing jigging experience between state transitions, batching state updates. That's a really big focus of this. It's also set the kind of the foundation for the long term vision of React. When we start thinking about like suspense for data fetching and maybe some other new APIs that we'll be building off of the current renderer, those would be the future. But what is really exciting about React 18 is how the out of the box features like automatic batching help remove janky experiences or improve their performance out of the box, as well as like new concurrent features like start transition will improve the state transitions. Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about this release.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. So we're reaching the end, and there are like, oh man, there's just a lot of things that I was hoping we would get to, but I guess that's a good problem that we had so much engagement. Maybe this is yet another sign we need to do this more often. So there was a question from Linton Yi. I want to get him in real quick before we move on. So Linton, do you want to? Oh, I gotta approve you. Add a speaker. So yeah, Linton, do you want to ask your question? Let's give him a moment. Nope, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, it's great to be here. As far as I know, that React 18 has put a lot of focus on UX, so making sure that it'll be easy to build a performant UI, and it'll be easy to precisely customize loading experience. So my question is about how does the designers at Facebook react to this change? Like, does it feel like it's mostly engineers' work, or does it feel like it's got them some new superpowers so that they want to learn more about this new changes, and so that they can it'll improve their work?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think it like hits on this theme that, man, I feel like we could have an entire talk just about this, or entire chat just about this. But we talk a lot about how React.js is, at least our vision is that it's not just for developers, right? It's not just people who go maybe like to a boot camp or go to school, like college or something for computer science. I guess the mission or the vision is that it should be for designers, it should be for anyone, even if they don't have a prior programming background. And the way that we do that is we root and we focus all of our APIs around user experience principles, not computer science or engineering principles. I mean, they're baked in there, as we've alluded to, but if you should be able to focus on the user experience and let React handle the complicated engineering. So we do have teams at Facebook of designers, and they were actually very helpful when we were designing Suspense. So we didn't really get to talk about Suspense that much today, but you can go and watch some of the previous talks that we've given on Suspense. I'll just give it like a very quick summary. I'm not going to be able to give a great explanation, but like Suspense, for those of you who don't know, is three things. It's a low-level API that library developers can use to build like data frameworks or routers. It's also primarily for most people, it's a high-level API for app developers to control the way that views load onto the screen. And again, this API is very centered around UX principles, not engineering jargon. And then it's also, in addition to the API itself, it's a suite of features and capabilities that build on top that should improve both the real and perceived performance of your app. So that lets you do things like throttle the appearance of placeholder UIs to reduce flickers. You can load data in the background while you're showing a busy indicator, as I described earlier. It's what powers our new streaming server renderer, which we'll probably talk about in a future Q&A, but you can also read about in our working group. Dan posted a really great architectural overview of how that works and why it's so exciting. Another promise of Suspense is that it allows you to use the same high-level APIs across all of the libraries that you use, whether it's data, router, images, whatever. It's integrated with the Start Transition API that we mentioned earlier. And there's a lot of potential future features that we think will build on top of this exact same architecture. Brian and Luna have been working on this feature called Off-Screen. That's kind of the code name. It might be called something else in the future. So all of those things are very centered around UX principles, both in terms of how we originally conceived them and in terms of the value proposition for folks. And we worked very closely with our UX researchers at Facebook in particular to inform some of the design decisions. Like we have this idea that if you're navigating to a new screen, you often have this effect where first you show a giant skeleton and then some data resolves, so you show a smaller skeleton that as things start to narrow in and more of the screen fills in. So we have this principle built in as just an example where as things are filling in from the outside in, we don't need to show a new nested spinner every frame, for instance. If data is loading really quickly, we can throttle the appearance of those nested skeleton views, those nested placeholders, because the user really doesn't need to see 5 frames in a row of successive nested things appearing on screen. It's really bad for performance because you have to do all these relayouts, but it's also just bad for user experience because it makes the screen look all janky and flashy. So that's just one basic example. We could talk about that for a really long time, but I hope that kind of answers your question. So, all right, we're at the end. Oh yeah, Dan, please.
Can I add a really small thing? Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify because I think that kind of get lost a lot. We in retrospect we kind of wish that maybe we should have called Suspense something like placeholder or loader, because it's really a designer concept. It's not a computer science concept. It's the idea is just that you already have somewhere in your code and your components, you have those checks like if is loading, return a spinner or something like this. And really the main thing that Suspense does is instead of writing that, you put it into your tree. So you wrap a part of your tree with this Suspense component, and you specify the spinner. And it might seem like a really small change, but this way, by putting something into the tree, we unlock all of these abilities, because now React knows that it's not just some condition in your component, some code, but it kind of moves it into the tree. And you can imagine, for example, design tools, no-code tools like Framer, or low-code tools like Webflow and so on, integrating with that. And so you could imagine building designs that are connected to data and just visually connecting. Here's a placeholder, here's a data source, and then it would just work with any data source. Or concretely to answer your question, how do designers use it? Yeah, we actually do have designers using this feature. And the way that works is, for example, a designer can decide, maybe we have 2 granular loading indicators, and let's just show 1. And so they can just delete Suspense component from one place in the tree and add it to another place without touching any of the code, basically. And the other things that designer can do is in React DevTools, there is a feature that lets you simulate what happens if any part of the tree suspends. So you can select a component, for example, a post or a comment, and that feature already exists in DevTools. You can press a button, and it turns into a spinner. So you can see how exactly a UI looks if some part has not loaded. And so that's something you cannot, you'd have to, mess with the code or know which part of the state in which components to change if you were doing it manually. But with Suspense, there is a single thing, kind of a single way to do it that can be integrated with the tooling, and that's kind of why we're excited about it. That designers can use it as well.
Yeah, thanks for that's. It's funny because Dan, we actually have, that was the original name of of the suspense component was placeholder, and we've had like, in fact, the moment Dan started talking about that, there was a flurry of activity in our team chat. People kind of going back and forth. Of, well, should we name it? Should we change the name? It's not too late. So maybe we will. Maybe we will. Please, if you have feedback on that, just let us know. What do you think we should name? What do you think we should name this suspense component? Should we go back to placeholder? I think Sebastian has suggested skeleton at some point. I don't know. I feel like I change my mind every day there because suspense is also a pretty good brand. Anyway, this has been a great conversation. Again, I think we could have gone on all day here, but no worries because we're going to have another one of these at some point. Thank you so much to all the people who asked a question. If I didn't get to you today, I'm very sorry. We just had so much to get to. We'll try to get to your question. Last time, Ricky did an amazing job documenting all the questions that we got. So thank you so much to everyone. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow the React blog, and you can go to the working group, React 18 working group on GitHub, which is linked to from the blog post, to follow along if you wish. And we'll have lots more to say about React 18 in the coming months, including maybe as we get closer to a beta as opposed to an alpha, we might have some nice content for y'all explaining some of these additional concepts in detail and hopefully in a way that is understandable to everyone. So thanks again for joining. Thanks to my fellow React team members. Thanks to the working group members who showed up. And we'll see